yeah, well, what do you think of his tariffs and the trade war and what it's doing to American manufacturing and blah, blah, blah. Barney and Clyde, episode 18, October 19th, 2019. Here's the rundown, peeps. Our first segment will be He's Not Playing 5D Chess, and we're going to talk about the very stable genius's recent doozies. When a lefty leader gets a clue and it doesn't go over well, Ecuadoran unrest in the wake of President Moreno's trying to claw the country's way back to solvency. Madam Bleachbit Unfiltered. How's that again, Hillary? And then corporate America's left turn. We got a couple of items for that. The NBA's kowtowing to China and the Business Roundtable's new definition of corporate responsibility that whets Fauxcahontas' appetite. So, welcome back to the Libation Station. Got yourself something bracing? If not, pour something and pull up a stool and join us. What do we have here, Clyde?
Today we have nitro cold brew coffee from a local business called Donut Central. So it's a donut joint on Central Avenue here in Columbus, Indiana.
Okay.
And for those of you who aren't familiar with nitro coffee, it's getting pretty popular now. So a lot of people are familiar with it already. But it's on the Guinness gas. So it's on a nitro gas, and they pump the beer or the Guinness beer through this nitrogen gas, and it gives it like a really silky, creamy texture. And so they pump this coffee through that same nitrogen gas, and it just gives it just the perfect
it does,
mouthfeel. And since it's cold brew,
I've been hearing about it. I hadn't tasted it before.
And as it's cold brew, also the cold brew tends to be less bitter, and you get more roasty notes out of the cold brew because the hot water steeps it too fast, and you get bitter notes out of it. So it's pretty darn tasty, and they're proud of it, and it's spendy, but well worth it in my opinion.
Yeah, and one of these days when I really permit myself to just go wild on carbs, I'm going to try some of their donut fare too. I go in there and I look at that stuff, and it's like,
it's very good. It's very good, but I reserve it for special occasions.
Exactly. They're not a sponsor or anything. Let's clarify that. But
we have no sponsors. But if you'd like to sponsor the Barney and Clyde show, we're open to discussion.
Yes, absolutely. And we do have a Patreon page where you could even get started on that.
And we'll let you know all those links here at the end of the show.
You bet. But yes, we've got 4, I think, rather timely segments today. This first one, this is... here we are trying to drum up support and get more listeners. I hope I don't chase anybody away with my take. The reason I was inspired to include this one, He's Not Playing 5D Chess. I think you all know who I'm talking about. The VSG.
The very stable genius.
The very stable genius. There is such a strong argument to be made for parameters around our political reality. That it does come down to a binary choice. I know that was the argument back in 2016 when it wound up distilling down to the VSG versus Madam Bleachbit. And which, by the way, that's Hillary Clinton. But I opted out. I kept my vote secret for a better little, probably about a year and a half. I finally let the cat out of the bag that I had voted for Evan McMullen. Not because I thought he had a chance, or even that he's got a woefully underbaked view on both domestic and foreign policy. And as a matter of fact, the guy might be a little bit of a flake. But the divine record book shows that I did not vote for either the VSG or Madam Bleachbit. And when stuff comes up, when I tangle with leftists, which doesn't happen as often as it used to because I know how to step around such droppings. But I once in a while it still happens. And when you inevitably get to the part about, well, what do you think of his tariffs and the trade war and what it's doing to American manufacturing and blah, blah, blah. I don't own that stuff. I can applaud the good policy moves, which are the judicial appointments, deregulation, pulling out of the Paris Climate Accord. And in my book, this will be outside the Venn diagram overlap between your libertarianism and my conservatism, but I'm also glad he pulled out of the JCPOA. Anyway, and what I consider good policy moves, I'm free to applaud them without having to own the other stuff. And I'm sorry, the other stuff, if it was not clear before, in the last couple of weeks, it has become abundantly clear that stuff just about outweighs the good stuff.
Yeah.
The guy is he's coming off the rails.
Well, I mean, when you weigh things out, you know, we've talked about this before, how the the propensity of people is to paint one thing as all good and the opposition as all bad, and there's no nuance to it at all, right? So I don't think you have to do that. I think you have to look at a candidate, and if we're going to live in this representative republic, you have to look at a candidate for their good and their bad and weigh them out against the alternatives.
Yeah. What's the old William F. Buckley axiom? I'm going to support the most conservative candidate that has a chance of winning in any political race.
I hate the lesser of two evils thing, and when you add third parties into it, the lesser of three evils doesn't really spark much inspiration in me either. I really want to get behind a candidate that I'm really proud of and that I really want to support, but I don't have that, so I have to make the best judgment call I can. In
this fallen world, that's often the case. But this guy...
This is great stuff, by the way.
He's a narcissist. He's absolutely self-absorbed. We saw that. He was teasing this nation before he threw his hat in the ring back in 2015. Well, you're making strong signals that you're going to run, Mr. Trump. Is it going to... Oh, gee, I don't know. My businesses are doing so fantastically that I just don't know if I really want to set that aside. But I do love this nation, so I just might do it.
Yeah.
But he teased us.
Well, it's like every politician, though. It's like, oh, I don't really want to, but I might have to because no one else is going to step up to the plate.
Right. And I may have to... humble myself and do the noble thing.
You need me.
He really laid it on thick. And but then there's all the stuff that all of us know. The mean and usually juvenile nicknames for people.
You have some juvenile nicknames for people too.
The argument could be made, I guess.
So I guess they're not that juvenile. But you do have some nicknames for people. Sarcastic nicknames.
I try to put some creative flair into mine, at least. He doesn't.
Oh, come on. Low energy Jeb. You know what I mean? Like,
Jeb was kind of low energy.
So I think he's good at this name things. And I think one of the things that people really underestimated was the reality TV guy. Of course he knows how to get to the top. Of course he knows how to throw his competition out, under the bus. He's been watching that play out across his show for years. And
I realize we've had presidents with sybaritic pasts before. John Kennedy comes to mind, Lyndon Johnson, and of course Bill Clinton. At least these guys had the discretion. They say that hypocrisy is the homage that vice pays to virtue, and at least these guys had the sense of decorum and a sense of respect for the office they held to conduct themselves as if they weren't, little weasels or minks or whatever. This guy, he ran for office knowing that all his interviews with Howard Stern and Billy Bush and all that kind of thing were out there for everybody to see,
yes, there's no point in him pretending that he's like some kind of conservative or some kind of values-driven person.
Yes, and therein lies the core of this. There's nothing consistent. He has no core set of guiding principles.
Yeah, but
never has.
But it's like the only thing you can expect is the unexpected, right? So with him, it's like, I don't know. I almost respect that more, that the authenticity of your jackassery than this facade of you being a decent human being. Like Barack Obama had a nice smile and was well spoken, and George Bush was I don't know, he's kind of an airhead, but he was a cordial statesman-like leader. But behind the scenes they're mass murderers. So I don't know which one I prefer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I think I'd rather have a foul-mouthed idiot. You know what I mean? who's at least genuine about who they are.
He's upfront about it. That's for
even
sure.
if that's a terrible person.
The point I think does stand though that he used to. He was a Democrat on and off for most of his adult life. He only changed back to the Republican Party, I don't know, 2011 or something like that. There's that famous picture of Bill and Hillary Clinton at his wedding to his third wife, Melania, yawking it up at the wedding reception. But do
you think somebody buying off Democrats because makes them a Democrat necessarily?
No, he's perfectly upfront about it. He says, "Yeah, I used to." Whoever was in power in city council seats in New York City or state legislature or the federal Congress, whatever, my interest was in keeping them from going after deals I was trying to make.
Yeah.
And eminent domain, his use of eminent domain to oust people out of their homes be able to build casinos. Anyway, we all know that. I just was setting the table a little bit. In the last week or so, a couple weeks, he has just... Okay, now, once again, hopefully that some of you are new to this. I'm sure there are some long-timers, too, because we are growing a pretty sizable audience and folks that come back for episode after episode. But Clyde's a libertarian, and I'm a conservative, and there's a lot of Venn diagram overlap, but there are places outside it. Apropos, I'd probably see the whole Obama and before him Bush thing, mass murders. I'd probably see that a little differently.
Okay, maybe that's hyperbolic.
Okay, maybe.
But
not.
I stand by it.
Yeah,
We'll break it down.
No, I want you to stand by your firmly held beliefs on anything. That's what apropos of what we were just saying, that's where integrity comes from. It's saying I'm about this, and I make no apologies. You've got a consistent set of core beliefs, and I respect that a great deal. Hopefully, I do too.
Likewise, yeah, absolutely.
So
we wouldn't be doing this.
With that, now let's get. With that said, you and I probably see the pullout from Syria a little differently. But in any event, even if, which I suspect you do, think it was a good thing, don't you think it could have been handled in a less chaotic way?
Perhaps.
Okay, but and one huge element of this is this strange dance he's been doing with President Erdogan of Turkey. The famous phone call where he. Little thread here, little compliment here, and blah, blah, blah. And he wound up the thing by saying, hey, you want to come to the United States next month for a state visit? And then, boom, 2 days later, Erdogan's got troops crossing over the border and aerial bombing to soften up the territory for them to move into, and then the two Mikes, Pompeo and Pence, go over to meet with Erdogan and his people and announce a ceasefire. The VSG gets on Twitter and goes, Mideast peace has been achieved. We're in a new era of stability and blah, blah, blah. The hell we are. Turkey's foreign minister said we got what we wanted out of the deal, and what it amounts to is that the Kurds are being forced to leave the area where they've always lived in order for us to be able to say we've achieved a ceasefire. Mm-hmm. Anyway, but I'm leaving out there was a development in the timeline in between the phone call and the two Mikes going over there, and that was the letter. And no matter how you feel about the Kurd, Syria, Turkey thing, it sounds like it was written by a fifth grader. You've read it, haven't you?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And I don't want just real quickly. It's official letterhead, the White House, Washington, October 9th, 2019. Dear Mr. President, let's work out a good deal with a exclamation mark. and part of this whole business of deals, he views everything in terms of deals. That's his framework for viewing anything. Yeah, I got a good deal. That's the way he approaches his dealings with Kim Jong Un and President Xi and everybody. Let's work out a good deal! Exclamation mark. You don't want to be responsible for slaughtering thousands of people, and I don't want to be responsible for destroying the. Yeah, a pretty direct threat. I'm going to destroy the. But hey, we can still work out a deal. I'm just showing you what my leverage will be.
Right.
I've already.
And I will.
Yeah.
I don't want to be responsible to destroy the Turkish economy, and I will.
I've already given you a little sample with respect to Pastor Brunson. I've worked hard to solve some of your problems.
Christ.
I know. The posturing of himself as someone who nobly does others' heavy lifting. Don't let the world down. You can make a great deal. We're back to talking about deals again. And history will look upon you favorably if this is done in the right and humane way. It will look upon you forever as the devil if good things don't happen. Don't be a tough guy. Don't be a fool! Exclamation mark. I will call you later.
Yeah, smiley face emoji.
Yeah,
LOL.
It's just nuts. And then there's the unworkable comparison between the PKK, which is the Kurdish group that had been doing most of our fighting for us in trying to stabilize that strip of northern Syria at the Turkish border. Yeah, Trump makes a comparison between the PKK and ISIS and suggests that maybe the PKK is more of a terrorist organization than ISIS was or has been or whatever. And
but didn't we give them both guns? Like, didn't we arm every side of this conflict?
No. Well, no. There are some really terrorist Kurdish organizations that we did not, and so forth. But and
so I guess the real question is we're not really talking about the foreign policy about Syria. We're talking about the presentation of a letter like this, to a foreign leader of which we have a potential violent conflict with.
Whatever foreign policy outcome you wanted out of this, the way it's being handled, he's just, like I say, he's like a fifth grader.
Yeah, the don't be a tough guy thing. First of all, I would just like to state for the record that love him or hate him, this is clearly the most hilarious administration.
It's got an entertainment factor
my
to it,
lifetime,
no doubt.
for sure.
And this whole business of he'll say something about Russia being a big threat on the world stage or something, and then he'll say, something like this: Syria may have some help with Russia, and that's fine. It's a lot of sand. They've got a lot of sand over there, and there's a lot of sand they can play with. And oh, you kids just go have fun in your sand, you know. And then he, in that same conversation, he decided to kind of explore the Russia angle. He says it used to be called the Soviet Union. Now it's called Russia for a reason, because they lost. Once again, think this deal-making businessman always running the numbers in his head. Because they lost so much money in Afghanistan, they had to downsize. The breakup of the Soviet Union was not downsizing like you downsize a business. It was returning a cobbled-together socialist union back into its constituent republics, countries that it had been before. Right. Lenin.
Which wasn't more. It wasn't a union as much as it was an empire.
Exactly. Yeah. So if Russia wants to get involved with Syria, that's really up to them. Not thinking at all about world stage alliances and power dynamics, thinking that, Russia would love nothing more because it gives them a leg up in their overall hegemonic designs.
Well, that's a fascinating thought.
And then,
I don't want to take you down a rabbit hole, but I would love to explore that at some point.
Okay.
So,
anyway, and then this business of calling it what he's done when nobody outside of his throne sniffers and leg humpers see it this way. Everybody else sees it as a blunder, but he's calling it strategically brilliant. And even if it were, wouldn't that, if a president of the United States had some sense of decorum, wouldn't he leave that to somebody else to call it that?
Yeah.
The guy's just so impressed with himself.
I don't get it. I don't understand how this letter makes sense. And if I were to receive this, if I had any leverage whatsoever, like I had some kind of military might behind me, which I'm not really sure how powerful Turkey really is, I would just read this like what the hell is this? You know what I mean?
Yeah, really.
We're clearly this is not going to make me want to work with this person.
Exactly. And well, the reports say Erdogan's aides have said that they threw it in the trash.
Yeah. So here's another question. So Turkey is a NATO member, and Syria is Syria NATO?
Oh no.
So Syria is UN member.
Sure,
state.
yeah.
So we have.
I'm not sure there's a nation state in the world that doesn't belong to the UN.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there's this alliance.
I don't know why, but they all do. Anyway.
There's this alliance situation here that so we technically have to have Turkey's back if they go to war.
Yeah.
Well, what if they go to war against us?
Right.
Do we have to ally with them in their war against us?
Right. Yeah. And is there some kind of legal provision for that in the NATO charter or something? Yeah.
Do they get kicked out of NATO? Do we get kicked out of NATO?
Right.
What's the determination if two NATO states go to war with one another?
Well, how are we doing on time?
We're over.
Okay. We're over. I just want to say in conclusion for this segment that I save it, all you Trump shills, save it with that, oh, you'd probably rather that Hillary Clinton had got in. Oh, you probably would like one of these 16 or 20 or whatever they're Democrat people. No, I would not. I find every Democrat candidate unacceptable. But it does not logically follow from that I have to get behind Trump. And now, well, then how are you going to vote, Barn? And I've said this on my blog, and I've said it on social media, and I'll say it right now. When I step into that booth, first Tuesday in November 2020, what I will cast my vote based on what I think is best going to ensure the application of the 3 pillars of conservatism to public policy. That's all I've got to say on the matter. I've got nothing to say about any personalities or parties or factions within parties or anything like that. I'm going to vote based on what I think is most likely to ensure the application of the 3 pillars of conservatism to public policy. And
you have to make that choice based on the choices that you have available.
You bet.
Again, if we're gonna live in this republic framework, you have to make that choice, and you're gonna choose a candidate. You're gonna choose somebody to either cast your vote or support, and they're not gonna be perfect. You know what I mean? They're probably gonna be far from perfect, but they're gonna be as close as you can get. And your choice is either not vote or vote for as close as you can get.
And just one more word. I'm really kind of glad. It seems to me, maybe it's just I'm kind of intuiting this. I don't have any objective analysis of it, but you're seeing the term "never Trumper" used less and less, and I'm gratified by that because I want to distinguish. I am not. I will not be put in the same category with, say, Jennifer Rubin and Max Boot and people like that who have entirely left conservatism over the Trump phenomenon. Quite the contrary. I find Trump objectionable because I am a conservative. All right.
Right. Good enough. I like it. That's the thing. Stand by your principles and hold on to them. And that's exactly the reason why I'm not a Democrat anymore, is because I've held firm in my principles, and they went to cuckoo land. Okay, so I think that segues well into our next topic, because we talked about the pullout from Syria, right? Which I think is a whole topic in and of itself. I'd love to talk about that maybe next time.
Oh yeah.
But you can't unring the bell. We've talked about that before. Once you commit an action, it's hard to unring that bell. You can't do it.
You bet.
So stepping out of Syria, of course, it leaves a vacuum for others to come in and wreak havoc. So how do you stop a government policy once it's been implemented? And I think Ecuador is really learning this lesson hard.
And so much is on the world's plate these days that this one's is not very prominent on our radar screen, but it ought to be. Do you folks know what's been happening in Ecuador for the last couple of weeks? It got started early in October with protests that turned into riots over the ending of fuel subsidies.
Yes.
But it's since, sort of like Hong Kong, it's morphed into much more than that now. So I'll let you kind of take it from here.
Well, I think that the interesting thing about it is that in Ecuador, they had sort of a leftist, I don't want to say utopia, but just like Venezuela in the early days.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They sort
when there was enough money to subsidize this stuff. And,
right.
Yeah.
Right. I think we talked offline. We were just texting and stuff like that, and we were talking about the parallels of Venezuela. You're kind of like, that's the sort of the opposite of what happened in Venezuela, but it's sort of the opposite of what happened after the crisis hit in Venezuela. Yeah. Because they're starting to be austere, and they're starting to worry about the money, and they're starting to pull back and implement some, I don't want to say free market, but they're pulling back on the social policies because they have to, and it's the right thing to do. But there is, like, in Venezuela, they rode the price of oil, always anticipating it to be high. They're rich because they've got all this natural resource, and they spread that amongst the community in this socialist fashion, providing all this public infrastructure and all these public services, and everybody's happy, right? There's all this free stuff, and it's great. And then the price of oil bottoms out. The milk and honey dries up, right? And so they double down, and they start printing money, right? And the bolivar, their currency, goes in the toilet, and people are starving, right? So in Ecuador, they kind of did the same thing. They rode the price of oil. They expected it to always be high, and then it crashed, right? And then the milk and honey dries up. Well, in the previous administration was fairly leftist.
Little brief recent history lesson. Rafael Correa, the Lenin Moreno's predecessor, the current president's predecessor, came in on a wave of renewed leftist fervor throughout Latin America. It was about the same time that Maduro took over from Chavez, and the Sandinistas, Daniel Ortega came back to power in Nicaragua. A number of it looked like there was a renewed leftist fervor throughout Latin America, and he came in on that way. Bolivia, I forget the guy's name, but Bolivia had a socialist president too, and so and like you say, then once Carrera's turn was over and Moreno ran and was elected, he got in there, and he had
an epiphany.
An epiphany, yes, very good. And like, wait a minute, we don't have the money anymore.
Right, yeah. And the previous administration had gotten a substantial loan from the IMF, from the International Monetary Fund, right?
Yeah.
So they're under pressure by the IMF to pay that back.
Exactly.
And they're also basically on the hook for all these services that they promised to the people.
Yeah.
And the biggest catalyst, I think, for the civil unrest, which resulted in a lot of protests and violent protests, that actually ran the president.
Didn't they storm the Parliament building or the presidential palace or something?
They had to evacuate the capital, and they basically established a new capital in a different city, an interim capital.
Yeah, right.
So the people got really pissed off, right? They're throwing Molotov cocktails and stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the biggest catalyst for that, though, was they were ending these social programs, but the biggest one was a subsidy on fuel. So diesel, they flipped the switch and said, okay, subsidies are over. So the price of diesel
Mhm.
doubled overnight,
Yeah.
and the price of gasoline almost doubled overnight.
Yeah.
And people went crazy. And of course, that's going to have an effect on the economy. People are for the last 40 years have been getting this at a cheaper price. You know what I mean? So they're expecting to have that forever, and they don't see what the previous administration took out of the economy
Yeah.
by providing all this distortion in the marketplace by putting all this money into subsidies for fuel.
Mhm.
Now, there's probably a gain from those subsidies in some regard because
Mhm.
people are buying the fuel, they're able to do more, right? So there's probably an economic shift,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't see what is missing
Mm-hmm.
from the economy.
Yeah.
So as Venezuela doubled down and increased the money supply and inflated their currency, Moreno's actually doing the right thing by trying to pay down the debt, trying to close the hole in the hull of the boat,
Mm-hmm.
and being austere and balancing the books.
Mm-hmm.
But he's ripping the Band-Aid off real fast.
Yeah. 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 And it's a rude shock.
Yeah, but you can't unring the bell. So
Right.
once these subsidies are in place, how do you tiptoe out of them?
Yeah.
Because people aren't going to tolerate it increasing incrementally over the next.
And this has
6
ramifications
years.
for us here in the United States. Our entitlements. I love that
Yeah.
term. I love that term.
Mhm.
Social Security, Medicare,
Good
Medicaid.
example.
Yeah.
Talk about
they're,
Social Security.
They're awash in unfunded liabilities. But you see these people on Facebook and that was promised to me, and Congress has to figure out a way to do it.
Well, yeah, it was promised to you one.
Yeah.
And you also paid into it your whole life, your whole working career.
Right. That money's been long spent. The money I've been paying in has been going to current recipients all my adult life.
Sure. And maybe you or I, might be able to dodge the bullet if it's not available for us. But the reality of it is, as the leftists would say, the reality of it is that if you take this away, there's going to be little old ladies that starve to death or freeze to death, and that's true. If you just rip the Band-Aid, Social Security ends tomorrow.
Yeah, we can't do that.
You can't do that.
Yeah.
So how do you unring the bell?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? How do we get out of this mess that we have in the United States? Because look at food, right? Corn, wheat, soybeans, sugar. All these crops are heavily subsidized by government. And I think we should stop the subsidies. But if we stopped them tomorrow, the price of food that I like to eat,
yeah, sure.
Like meat especially, chicken, eggs, beef, pork, all that stuff is going through the roof tomorrow as soon as corn price doubles.
Yeah. So the lesson, boys and girls, is don't subsidize stuff in the first place.
Yeah.
Old Uncle Barnes' first law of economics. A good or service is what buyer and seller agree that it is worth. No other entity should be party to that agreement.
That's right.
Certainly not government.
That's right.
Okay.
And this is what we have. This is why we harp on this so much, and this is why small government people harp on this so much, is because once this thing becomes insolvent and you can't physically provide this to people anymore, once you don't have the resources to actually provide the service or the product to people through the public option anymore, how do you quell the civil unrest that comes from that?
You bet.
Especially after you've trained people to not need to take actions for themselves.
Yeah.
Once you've trained them to not have to save for their retirement, once you've trained them to live on food that's terribly inexpensive or not, take a stake in producing their own.
Right.
How do you get back to square one?
Yeah.
You get government out of it. That's what you do.
Exactly. Okay.
Quit messing up the marketplace.
Okay. Is it time for segment 3?
Oh, it is.
Oh, Madam Bleachbit Unfiltered, and that's one that there's always content for. Today we are going to look at her interesting conspiracy theory about Tulsi Gabbard.
Yeah. So, do you want to do that one first, or I've got?
You got some other.
I highly recommend. So what we're talking about is there's a new podcast called Campaign HQ.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, and the podcast is with what's his name?
David Plouffe.
David Plouffe. David Plouffe was Barack Obama's campaign manager.
Okay.
Okay, and he is a real piece of work, man. Like he has swallowed all the Kool-Aid. Like
Okay.
I'm surprised there's any Kool-Aid left for the rest of the entire left.
Okay.
There's no Kool-Aid left for the left.
Let's hear what you got.
All right, so let's go ahead and listen to her
On David Plouffe's podcast. Okay.
on Democrats, and this is what I find funny is we talked a lot about offline about conspiracy theories, right? And the left's fascination with calling out conspiracy theorists, right? And if you listen to them talk for more than 10 seconds, you are going to hear billions of conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
It's hilarious and it's insane. And so let's start best foot forward with Hillary Clinton on her fellow Democrats here.
Okay.
I'm not making any predictions, but I think they've got their eye on somebody who's currently in the Democratic primary and are grooming her to be the third-party candidate. She's a favorite of the Russians. They have a bunch of sites and bots and other ways of supporting her so far.
So she's talking about Tulsi Gabbard.
Sure. Yeah.
So she's a favorite of the Russians. Okay, you know what? I don't doubt that's true, right?
Yeah.
I don't doubt that the candidate that's saying, guess what we should do? We should stop bombing everyone's energy supply that's not our own.
Yeah.
I have no doubt that an energy producer, you know what I mean, would think that that's a good candidate. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. It just makes pragmatic type sense.
So, but this gets so good.
Okay.
And that's assuming Jill Stein will give it up, which she might not, because she's also a Russian asset. Yeah.
Do you know who Jill Stein is? Jill Stein was the Green Party candidate
Right.
for president. So Hillary Clinton just said Jill Stein is a Russian asset. Jill Stein is like a medical doctor.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
Right.
like she's a leftist,
Yeah.
right? She's probably a pseudo commie,
Yeah.
but she's a nice lady from like Oregon or something.
Right.
She's just a lady, you know what I mean, who's got a lot of political overlap opinions with you, Hillary Clinton,
Yeah.
and she's a Russian asset. I
Yeah.
mean, if anyone's a Russian asset, criminy.
It's a
Yeah.
Russian asset. I mean, totally. And so they know they can't win without a third-party candidate.
What? They can't win without a third-party candidate. Like, the impact of third-party candidates is so insignificant. Like, was there a single county in the United States carried by a third-party candidate in 2016?
Yeah. No. I
One?
Yeah.
Was
yeah.
there one? I don't think that there was.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mhm.
I think as far as the popular vote goes, third-party candidate in the Green Party in Hawaii got like 1 or 2%. So it's that's very high.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Gary Johnson got 3% of the popular vote, which is 3 times higher than any libertarian ever has in history, including Gary Johnson himself in 2012.
Okay.
So it's like the impact of third parties is so insignificant. It did not throw the election
Yeah.
whatsoever. This is insane lying psychobabble.
Yeah.
All right.
Um.
So Russian asset. Jill Stein and Tulsi Gabbard are Russian assets. Your thoughts, Barney Quick?
Hillary really needs to just wander the woods of upstate New York and do some reflecting. Yeah, seriously. I mean, I think that all this is triggered or catalyzed by a deep-seated fear that she's just about, her 15 minutes are just about up, that she's about to become completely irrelevant, obsolete.
Let me play you another one of these.
Okay.
I think it's going to support what you're just saying.
Okay.
Especially because I've titled this one, Hillary spells out exactly why not to vote for Democrats.
Okay.
All right.
when I became the nominee, I inherited a bankrupt organization, and Donald Trump inherited a well-funded, well-prepared organization. The day he got the nomination, having done nothing for Republicans his entire campaign, was a day that there already were, like 21 offices in Florida. I had to do all of that. There was nothing.
First of all, I don't believe you. I don't believe you that the Democratic Party, the Democratic National Committee, didn't have offices in Florida. You had to build them all. I don't believe that, right? I believe that the Democratic Party has a pretty good foothold in Florida, even if it's a red state, right? But you didn't have to grassroots build the entire Democratic Party from scratch, you freaking narcissist. But...
that's almost kind of a Trump-esque attitude. I came in and did it myself, and I did all the heavy lifting, and the organization needs to be very grateful to me.
Thank God for me, or this place would be totally screwed.
Exactly.
Yes, you're so right.
Yeah.
So, but she does say something that I do believe, which is she inherited a bankrupt organization. Well, first of all, the Democratic National Committee is not your organization.
Right.
You're more of their asset than they are yours. But I believe you that they're bankrupt because you guys freaking bankrupt everything you touch,
Exactly. Yeah.
Nothing. And so, from my perspective, I think we'll be a little better off than we were back then, but we're going to be outgunned, outspent, outlied. I mean, we're going to have a lot of problems. And the thing we have to do is get enough people to turn out so that they can't, steal those votes through suppression in Wisconsin or convince blacks not to vote in Michigan.
What is she talking about?
Yeah. Could you substantiate that for us, please?
So I looked into some of that, like, okay, voter suppression in Wisconsin. Okay, so please chime in with this if you know something more about this, because I was like, okay, so there was a big voter suppression thing going on in Wisconsin. So tell me about that. Yeah. So I looked into that a little bit, and not deeply, I'll admit. But what I found was that they require a voter ID in Wisconsin, basically.
Sort of like when you go to the liquor store.
Yeah.
Or onto the floor of the DNC convention hall.
There you go. Yeah. You just have to prove who you are so you can vote one time. And I'm not a big fan of the government saying you have to carry your ID or you have to be able to present all that kind of stuff. Whatever. But, like, if we're going to live in the republic that we live in, I don't think it's a terrible stretch to say every person gets one vote for each office, and that's it. And we need to keep a tally on that. Yeah. And I'm sure, because government is incompetent and sometimes malevolent, I'm sure maybe they kicked some people off the roster. Yeah. Right? And you need to make sure that your voter registration every year, you need to make sure that you're registered. That's on you. You got to do that. But they also said that I'm not sure who they is supposed to be. I'm sure it's Republicans. Right. Convinced blacks in Michigan not to vote.
Yeah, that one really needs some substantiation
First of all,
subatomic particle of credibility.
If any of your rhetoric is true, then why would Republicans of all groups have any sway with black people in Michigan? Like why? I mean, why would they're not Republicans? You know what I mean?
What did they do? Sit down with them in a coffee shop and say, "You thinking about voting?" Right. Well, I am. Here's why you don't want to do it. I mean, how did that work?
Right. Targeted Facebook ads or something like that. What exactly are you saying that Republicans did to convince black people not to vote in Michigan? I think what happened is, we're talking about a bunch of individuals, right? And everyone has their reasoning on why they choose to vote or choose not to vote or who they choose to vote for. Yeah. But I would say that in general, they probably, like most people in the United States, didn't gravitate to one candidate or another. They felt like there was I assume that they felt like there was two bad options. What's the damn point? Yeah. And I couldn't agree more. Sure. But to say that Republicans suppressed the vote, or Republicans,
how did they do it? And
convinced black people not to vote.
Okay.
All right.
How we looking time-wise here?
We're getting really behind.
Okay. Well, then we maybe better
Okay,
head on into
so
segment 4?
I caught a lot of clips from that podcast. We won't play them. Maybe I'll put some of them on Patreon.
Yes, bonus content.
And I highly recommend going and listening to that entire episode with David Plouffe.
Okay.
On Campaign HQ. It's about an hour long. You won't regret
Sounds like it.
You will regret it, but you won't regret it.
Packed with humdingers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Humdingers.
All right. Well, let's get through segment 4 here and probably corporate America's left turn. Corporate acquiescence to the left has been happening for quite some time, but it's really gathered momentum lately. 2, we've got the NBA's kowtowing to China and the Business Roundtable's new definition of corporate responsibility, and how it has whetted Fauxcahontas' appetite. But you're probably familiar, aren't you, all with what happened? Steve, or wait a minute, the general manager of the Houston Rockets. This all got started with the general manager of the Houston Rockets, didn't it? Talking about China's heavy-handed tactics in dealing with Hong Kong. To which then the owner of the Houston Rockets said, "Don't listen to him. He doesn't speak for our organization," and he had to puke all over himself, and there's all this controversy. And then Golden State Warrior coach Steve Kerr was over in China, and he said that during his visit to the country, nobody had asked him about China's human rights abuses. So, nor our record of he does his moral equivalency thing, nor our record of human rights abuses. And went on to say, people in China didn't ask me about, people owning AR-15s and mowing each other down in a mall. The odd nut that mows people down in a enclosed public space in the United States, not only does it account for an infinitesimal fraction of gun violence, it's a super rare occurrence, even though it's been occurring more frequently.
Yeah.
But to equate that with government orchestrated abuse of human rights, like happens all the time in China. Which, by the way, and maybe Clyde, if we could put this up. I sent it to you the other day, this piece in Haaretz, the Israeli newspaper, about a woman who escaped from, she was a Uyghur, the Muslim minority over in near the Kazakh border, and how the Chinese government has set up these re-education camps for them. Brutal stuff. I mean,
is this there's 1 million?
You bet, yeah. So we don't have time for me to get into it the way I wanted to, but the details of this thing, what she saw happen to people, and what even happened to her a little bit before she escaped and rejoined her husband, who had escaped earlier with their kids. China, American businesses are doing lots of business with China, and there's the coastal or near coastal cities in China are economically vibrant and all that. But let's not forget, and we talked about this in the last episode, it's still a brutal Maoist totalitarian country. So anyway,
I don't think it's unfair to say, okay, well, maybe not unfair is a bad choice of words, but to say that the United States has problems and China has problems, like, oh, okay, that makes sense. But I think you're correct in drawing a moral equivalency of some of the places where, a lot of the freedoms that we have, or a lot of the times that our government curtails freedom. I think that's a false equivalency to the magnitude of what happens in China.
Absolutely it is. And then, dig this, the Portland Trail Blazers announced that they've severed relations with a company that does business with Israel following a pressure campaign by activists. The boycott, divest, and sanctions movement hammered on the Portland Trail Blazers until it quit doing business with this company, a manufacturer, Loophole, that had a contract to produce accessories for the Israeli Defense Forces. The BDS people hammered away at the Portland Trailblazers. they're what Israel is like the villain and not China or something. The NBA is just becoming a really morally bankrupt organization.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't understand why. I don't understand how, if their views are principled, how they're deciding who to social justice against
Yeah.
and who gets passed.
Exactly. Okay, and since we're running short on time, maybe we better go on into the other one here, which is Fauxcahontas. That would be Elizabeth Warren,
Yeah.
who has a number of falsehoods to her name. Not only her Indian heritage, but the fact that she was not fired for getting pregnant from her teaching job as a young woman,
Oh,
and also Michael Brown getting murdered, which is probably her most egregious lie. But anyway, the Business Roundtable a while back. Let's back up even further. Milton Friedman, the great economist, was exactly right that a corporation, a business's only real responsibility is to show a return to its shareholders, its owners.
I believe he said the business of business is business.
Yes. Anything else? Giving back to the community, gyms and smoothie cafes for your employees, whatever, all that stuff. The reason you do any of that is to serve that primary responsibility. If it's going to make your company run more efficiently and profitably to do that stuff, then the sole true responsibility of a company is to show a return on investment to its owners.
And the reason why Milton Friedman said that, his justification for that was that a business that's functioning in society, right, in a free market, right, not one that's influenced by or restricted by or bastardized by government policies, but a business that's operating within a free market can only do that if they're serving the public what it wants.
You bet.
And if a business is focusing on making a profit, right?
Yeah.
In a free market where they are penalized for doing bad things and rewarded for doing what society wants, then society gets better because of it. Yeah. That's why the business of business is business.
You bet. Yes. So the Business Roundtable, which is an organization that includes a number of Fortune 500 companies, recently came out with a document that redefines the purpose of a corporation, and there's a larger array of stakeholders. There's the workers. They usually, employees, as it's sometimes called, workers, and the communities they're in, and just all kinds of stuff. And these are all equally valid stakeholders with an equally valid say in how a corporation's business is conducted. And so they put this out. Now, the Wall Street Journal recently asked, did they put that out? Presciently noted that it had a whiff of preemption about it. Because Fauxcahontas has then said, okay, I'm going to hold your feet to the fire. She's proposing she's got this thing called accountable capitalism. She says, we want to see, by golly, we expect to see you make good on this, and really and truly enact policies, and we'll find government ways to penalize you if you don't. Oh, the workforce, customers, the global and local environment, community and societal factors. Hoping the alligator eats them last, kind of a thing. I mean,
My problem with all this is that if you get out of the way, businesses do a lot of this stuff.
All those sectors get served, yes.
In
the course of the company making a profit.
If you measure what good is done by an organization or an individual, right? What Warren's not taking into account is the enormous amount of good that we all get from the capital infrastructure that's created by profit-seeking companies. And the people that create the most good for society, those are the people who should be, in my opinion, rewarded.
Yeah.
Right? That's exactly how things should work. If in this socialist utopia, right, if you're not pulling your weight, right, they're going to do something about it. Right?
Yeah.
If you're pulling too much weight, you're pulling more than your share, you're going to be, in their rhetoric, you'll be rewarded for that. Right?
Yeah.
You get a slap on the back, or you get your nice little, Soviet recognition medal, or whatever it is, or your Chinese merit points, or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
But if society already works like that.
Yeah.
Right? If you provide your fellow human beings with what they need and want in life, then you'll be rewarded for that, unless the government steps in to mess it up.
Yeah. How are we doing time-wise, Clyde?
We're pretty close to the end. We got about 4 minutes left.
Okay. Our viewers are busy folks, and we want to respect their time commitment here.
Agreed.
But yeah, corporate acquiescence to the left is one of the most disturbing trends in American society, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and I think that the vilification of corporations by leftists,
that's the oddest part.
It's
of
terrible.
The whole thing.
I mean, if
they talk about corporate America and corporate greed and you can't find a better ally than corporate America, you lefties. Yeah.
Well, and it's like, again, paint everything all good or all bad.
Yeah.
I was having a conversation with somebody on Facebook about Jeff Bezos, and like how he's ruining the world by stuffing all this money under his mattress or whatever. And it's like, no, you don't understand what good Bezos has done for the world.
Yeah.
There's a huge supply chain that didn't exist before.
Yes.
There's people connecting with products and services and things that they need in a much more efficient manner than ever before. He's created a platform for businesses. Kindle Direct Publishing. Now you can write a book. Now you don't need any gatekeeper, like a publisher, telling you can't have a book.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They've broken down the barriers for that stuff. You can sell in the marketplace. You can buy from a distributor and sell on Amazon. You can even sell on Amazon, and Amazon will fulfill it for you, and you can make money.
Yeah.
Now, there's a trade-off. There are other stores that can't operate because some of the margins have been eaten through. And if you're doing Kindle Direct Publishing, then Amazon's going to take a big chunk. But like, you have all these opportunities because Amazon has provided them. And yes, there's a trade-off in society, but that's the way things are moving. You're not, no one who's vilifying Amazon is taking the total picture into purview.
Exactly. Well, listen, this is episode 18, by
17,
golly.
I think, right?
Oh, 17?
Yeah, 17.
Okay. All right. And I think a lot of you are probably long-timers, but hopefully there's some new ones among you, and this is what an episode of BNC is like.
Yep.
And so please join us again in a fortnight. We deliver this fortnightly and forthrightly here at the Libation Station.
Yeah, so if you have feedback or comments, send them to barneyandclydeshow@gmail.com.
Okay.
Or go to our Facebook, facebook.com/barneyandclyde.
You can even post comments under the way it's posted on YouTube.
You can put comments on YouTube for the time being. Who knows how long comments will last? But because YouTube comments can get quite vile.
Yeah.
But I want to keep them open, and I want people to be able to say what they think. But we are also now, our audio podcast is available on iTunes.
Okay.
And our audio, so you can use any, iTunes is the index, so our podcast, you can find it on any podcast manager. So whether you use Overcast, Downcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, whatever your app of choice is, you should be able to type in Barney and Clyde and find us right away.
Yeah.
To get the audio-only version of that. And if you're listening to the audio-only version of it right now, feel free to go to our YouTube channel and see the video feeds where we try to put up the links and all that stuff and show you a little bit more visual content too.
And then, of course, there's the Patreon page if you'd like to see us fulfill our dreams of ever fancier graphics and sound and improve our product. Improve our
product. And sincerely, from the bottom of my heart, I thank everyone for listening, making this possible for
You
us.
bet.
If you do donate on Patreon, we would appreciate that much more. Not only does that allow us to grow our quality, to grow the audio quality, the video quality, and all that kind of stuff, it allows us to grow the content too, because we can spend more time on this than making money for our real lives in other ways. We can make it bringing you commentary and perspective that you want. So
you bet.
Please do that.
So thank you. And so we'll see you back here at the Libation Station in a fortnight. And until then, stay free.
Stay free.